Hey there, and welcome back to Family Travel Unpacked. I'm Melissa, and in case you're new here, you can find tons of detailed destination guides, travel tips, hacks, and more on my website, thefamilyvoyage.com. Today, we're talking all about our recent Costa Rica adventure with the kids. From wildlife spotting and coffee farms to ziplining through rainforests and finally decompressing at a beautiful beach resort. This trip had everything: active volcanoes, rescued jaguars, sloths hanging in trees, thermal hot springs, and some relaxation too. And yeah, there were definitely a few mishaps along the way, including a windstorm that cleared the entire beach, plus a volcano that decided to get active right when we wanted to visit. So let's get started and talk all about Costa Rica with kids. Before we dive into our itinerary and all the crazy stuff that happened, I want to share some general Costa Rica tips that'll make your trip smoother. Things I wish we'd known before we went. First up, car seats. This is serious business in Costa Rica. As a certified car seat tech, I absolutely love it. Our rental company, Adobe, reminded us every single time we saw them that the car seat laws in Costa Rica are strictly enforced. The expectation is that kids ride in a harnessed car seat until at least 4 years old, a high back booster until at least 6, and a backless booster until at least 12. We brought a booster seat for our daughter, who was 10 at the time, and our son was 13, so he was big enough not to need one. Honestly, I wish the US had these laws in place too. While I always recommend bringing your own car seat that you're familiar with, if that's not an option for you, check out my link to Adobe in the show notes, and you can get a free car seat with your rental. They had a pretty wide range of options when I took a peek. Okay, my second tip. Souvenirs are shockingly expensive. If your kids love buying things to remember their travels, give them a budget in advance. We're talking $60 for a medium-sized stuffed sloth. Absolutely ridiculous. It was over $50 for a t-shirt that my son liked. And these weren't at fancy resort gift shops either, just the regular tourist spots. Also, read the labels carefully because we saw some items that were made to look Costa Rican, but they were actually manufactured overseas. It's the same cheap stuff that you can get in the US, but really overpriced. I think it's just a sign of how popular Costa Rica has become as a tourist destination. Third, feeding kids in Costa Rica is actually pretty easy, even if they're not super adventurous eaters. You'll find a lot of American staples like burgers and simple chicken dishes, but even plenty of the traditional Costa Rican foods work well for kids who are the tiniest bit flexible. At breakfast, look for eggs, gallo pinto, that's beans and rice, avocados, tortillas, and fresh fruit. At lunchtime, a casado plate is similar, but it's made with meat instead of eggs, and maybe a salad or plantains instead of fruit. Most meals in Costa Rica come with a lot of different items on the plate, so hopefully your kids can find something they like, even if they don't want to eat everything. My fourth tip, and this is a big one, bring binoculars for each kid and maybe another pair for the adults to share. We used our travel binoculars constantly in Costa Rica. Wildlife spotting is such a huge part of the experience, and binoculars made it way more engaging for the kids. I like to bring a pair for each kid to minimize the bickering. They don't take up that much space or weight, and the ones that we get aren't super expensive either. They also make the perfect pre-travel gift if you're looking for something practical. I've got a link in the show notes to our family's favorite pair. Finally, consider multi-city flights to save on driving time. We flew into San Jose and out of Liberia, which saved us about 3 or 4 hours of driving. Your kids will thank you for spending less time in the car. I think this is the route that most people go if they're visiting the central and northern parts of Costa Rica, and it makes sense. The flights were super affordable thanks to our Southwest Companion passes. Our kids each traveled for about $85 round trip, and the tickets for us adults were on points too. One heads up though, all flights to and from Costa Rica have government-imposed taxes and fees that total around $60 per person. It's unavoidable, and it's usually wrapped into your ticket price if you're paying cash, but if you're booking on points, you'll see them broken out. I just don't want you to be surprised. One thing before we get too deep into our Costa Rica travel experience is that the itinerary I'm about to share with you wasn't actually our original plan. Picture this. We're cruising toward Costa Rica, dreaming of beaches and sloths. The kids are excited. We've got our Manuel Antonio hotel, national park admission, and private guide all booked and ready to go. And then suddenly, the plane starts circling the Cayman Islands. I'm looking at the map, wondering what the heck's going on, and we keep circling for an hour. And finally, mid-flight, we turn around. No joke. We flew back to the United States when we were already halfway down to Costa Rica. I've never experienced anything like that before, but apparently there was a ground radar outage in Honduras, and Southwest, along with every other carrier that was on their way to Central America, had to divert back to their originating airports. As far as I know, it's never happened before. Hopefully it'll never happen again. But for our family, instead of waking up in Manuel Antonio the next day, ready to explore the jungle, we spent the night near the Orlando airport waiting for a rescheduled flight the following morning. We made the most of it by booking a hotel near the airport that had a great pool, which we knew would be covered by our travel insurance. More on that in a minute. But here's the problem. Our planned stay in Manuel Antonio was only 2 nights. Originally, it was supposed to be 3, but the kids had a conflict that we just couldn't get out of, so we shortened that visit by a day. It was going to involve a lot of driving to get to Manuel Antonio from San Jose. And with the overnight delay, it was basically impossible to make it work, so we had to pivot. And honestly, it turned out to be one of the best things that could have happened. While we were still sitting in the pool in Orlando, I started messaging all the guides that we had booked via WhatsApp and asking them what we should do and where we should stay between San Jose and La Fortuna, which was supposed to be our second stop. I hopped on Booking.com and grabbed a one-night stay. We ended up in Costa Rica's Central Valley, which I admit I hadn't focused on when I was planning. Most visitors skip it entirely on their way north to La Fortuna or west to the beaches. But it turned out to be a fantastic first day. It was totally different than what we'd expected, but still full of adventure. Now, this whole fiasco is a reminder of why I never travel without a solid travel insurance policy. Flight diversions, extra hotel nights, missed reservations, it all adds up fast. In our case, it was over $1,000. For less complicated trips, we rely on our excellent coverage from the Chase Sapphire credit card or our Chase Ink Business Preferred credit card. But it can be trickier if you're flying on miles and booking hotels on points like we do. I was beyond relieved to have a standalone travel insurance policy to cover the chaos. If you want to check out travel insurance options for your family, I've used a comparison website for years to find the best policies for our needs, and I'll link to it down in the show notes, or you can go to thefamilyvoyage.com/insurance. But the bigger lesson here is flexibility is your friend when traveling with kids. Yeah, it was really frustrating to lose a day and have to completely reorganize our plans. We were all bummed to miss Manuel Antonio, of course, but we stayed calm, we made some calls, and ended up with an itinerary that was honestly better for our family than the original one. All right, let's get into what we actually did. We landed in San Jose the first morning, finally picked up our rental car from Adobe, and immediately headed north into Costa Rica's Central Valley. Like I said, most people skip this area entirely and rush straight to La Fortuna or to the beach. But we had a day to fill, and thanks to those recommendations from our guides, I'm so glad we spent it in this area. First stop, the Starbucks Hacienda Alsacia coffee farm, which is about 45 minutes from the airport. I know Starbucks sounds totally un-Costa Rican, but hear me out. This place offers one of the best coffee tours in the country, according to lots of local guides. It's a 90-minute walk through the farm where you learn the whole process from plant to cup. Unfortunately, we actually didn't do the tour because we arrived without a reservation, of course. But we did get to eat breakfast overlooking this gorgeous valley with a waterfall, butterflies, and birds everywhere. You can see tons of pictures on my website. I had traditional gallo pinto with eggs, Ronnie got empanadas, and the kids split some pastries. Even though we couldn't do a tour, we did a fun coffee and chocolate tasting flight that walked us through different roasts and flavor notes. It was the perfect, gentle introduction to Costa Rica, especially after the crazy travel experience we'd had. From there, we drove another 30 minutes north to La Paz Waterfall Gardens. This is an animal sanctuary with 5 waterfalls, walking trails, and tons of rescued wildlife. For families, it's a great first stop in Costa Rica because the kids get to see animals they'd be pretty unlikely to spot in the wild, even with a guide. We're talking about lots of different tropical birds, butterflies, poison dart frogs, a few different species of monkeys, and plenty of big cats. They have ocelots, margays, a jaguar, and even a puma. The waterfall walk is also beautiful. You go downhill the whole way, hopping from one waterfall to the next. At the end, there's a bus that takes you back up to the entrance, which is nice because you've just walked for about 4 miles. You definitely want to wear good shoes because sometimes those paths can be a little slick. One thing to keep in mind is that this area sits on the edge of a cloud forest. It can get cool and visibility can drop to almost nothing. We got caught in incredibly thick fog in the afternoon when we were driving back, and we had to be really cautious coming down the mountain. But it was such a unique ecosystem. We loved it. One more thing when you're driving through this area, be sure to stop for fresh strawberries by the side of the road. It's a regional specialty and they're amazing. Now the big attraction in the area is the Poas volcano. Unfortunately, we skipped it even though it's only 30 minutes from the Starbucks coffee farm. Partly because our son has a real fear of active volcanoes, which is totally understandable, but also the week we arrived, Poas decided to get active, like major magma movement, high levels of volcanic gas, serious seismic activity. It actually erupted with a huge ashfall just a week after we left the area. So the moral of the story is check conditions before you go and be flexible, which, was kind of the theme of this whole trip. The next morning, we drove up to La Fortuna. It was about 3 hours through some really beautiful countryside. La Fortuna is all about Arenal volcano and outdoor adventures. We stayed at Arenal Observatory Lodge, this semi-rustic property that was originally built by the Smithsonian in 1987 to study the volcano. The rooms are basic but comfortable. There's no AC, but we had a good ceiling fan. There are also no TVs, but here's what you do get. A balcony where you can watch toucans flying through the treetops while hummingbirds are buzzing around below you. There's 7 miles of hiking trails, a 92-foot observation tower, and some of the best wildlife spotting we've had anywhere. We saw coatis, agoutis, peccaries, and so many birds. There are honeycreepers, tanagers, oropendulas, bananakeets, and I'm sure tons more. There were actually a bunch of birding groups that were staying at the lodge while we were there. We could also hear a troop of howler monkeys deep in the forest surrounding the base of the volcano, right from our room. It was super cool. The breakfast buffet there was solid. Plenty of options, both American and Costa Rican, and lots of choices for the kids. We thought dinner was pretty good too. The sea bass and Caribbean chicken were standouts for us. One quick note for families with food allergies, Costa Rica is a really great choice. Our daughter has celiac disease, and almost all of the cuisine that you'll find is naturally corn or cassava based, so there is no problem finding safe food. They also don't use a whole lot of nuts, and they seem to be pretty aware of all the issues surrounding food sensitivity and food allergies. Things like gallo pinto at breakfast, tamales, patacones, and all that stuff is naturally gluten-free, naturally nut-free, and you can always ask about eggs. One thing I want to warn you about the lodge is that it's pretty far outside of town. You might say it's on the backside of the volcano and La Fortuna is on the front. We like the location because it was really peaceful, but if you don't want to have so much driving to do, then I have a few other great family-friendly options in my La Fortuna article, linked down in the show notes. I definitely recommend taking a guided wildlife tour in or around La Fortuna. We did one in town and we saw at least a half a dozen sloths of all ages. It was a huge hit for the whole family. If you don't go with a guide at any point, chances are good that the only sloth you'll see is the one that hangs out in the tree next to the main road. Literally everyone who's been to La Fortuna has taken a picture of that exact sloth, and you'll always be able to find him because there are a dozen people standing below looking up into that tree. Other than that one sloth, they can actually be kind of hard to spot if you aren't an expert. Those binoculars I mentioned were clutch. On our sloth tour, the kids could always spot the sloths way up in the trees, and from our terrace at the lodge, they could follow birds as they flew from branch to branch. One evening, we did a great Costa Rican cooking class that was hosted by a local family. It was the perfect balance of learning the recipes and techniques, tasting amazing food, and connecting with our host and his wife and son in a mix of English and Spanish. One of the highlights for me was ziplining at Hotel Los Lagos. They've got 12 cables that go through the rainforest with the Arenal volcano as the backdrop. We even had to pause midway through the tour because a family of monkeys was walking along the next line that we needed to use. So cool. The guides were really awesome. Kids can zip solo or they can attach themselves to a guide, and they could make a different choice at each platform depending on how they're feeling. But here's the best part. The tour ended right at the pool deck of Los Lagos, and there are more than a dozen hot and cold spring-fed pools there. With the cost of the ziplining, which is really reasonable, you get free access to the entire property all day. So we spent the whole afternoon bouncing between pools, going down the super fast and kind of scary water slide, and just decompressing in this gorgeous setting. After 3 nights of adventure in La Fortuna, we were ready for a complete change of pace. My family tells me that they want a balance of trip versus vacation, so I try to give them that when I can. We drove about 3 hours to the Papagayo Peninsula on the Pacific coast. The road was slow, narrow, and windy at times, so keep that in mind if anyone in your family gets carsick. We made it to the Andaz Peninsula Papagayo Resort, and that's where our trip shifted from go, go, go to slow, slow, slow. The Andaz is probably one of the most popular Hyatt properties you'll find, especially for families. It's a mid-sized boutique resort with about 150 rooms, and it's nestled into a steep hillside overlooking the Gulf of Papagayo on the Pacific side. It's so well integrated into the landscape that you can barely see the buildings when you're out on the water. We booked with Hyatt points, so it was 29,000 points per night at the time, although it's gone up since then, unfortunately. To snag our room on points, I made sure to book when the calendar opened exactly 13 months in advance to the day. I ultimately had to shift things, but I was glad that I had locked in most of the dates we needed well in advance. Since I have Hyatt Globalist status, we got free breakfast for the whole family, which saved us a ton of money, and that breakfast is fabulous. It has every type of American and Costa Rican food you can think of. You could definitely load up there and skip lunch if that's how your family rolls. But the breakfast isn't cheap. I think when we were there, it was almost $40 per adult, and kids are half price while toddlers eat free. There are also cheaper a la carte options if you want the convenience of eating on site, but you're on a tighter budget. The whole Papagayo Peninsula is pretty remote, and unfortunately, there aren't really affordable local restaurants nearby. I wasn't able to upgrade us to a suite because the hotel was 100% full for spring break, but thankfully our regular room was pretty spacious. We had over 500 square feet with 2 queen beds and this massive balcony with beautiful bay views. I'd sit out there every morning to watch the sunrise, and at night we could do some stargazing. One night we actually saw fireworks from the nearby planet Hollywood. But here's what I love most about the Andaz Papagayo. You could pretty much do nothing and still have an amazing time, and that's high praise for me, since sometimes it's really hard for me to slow down and relax. There are 3 beaches on the property. The main one, Playa Sombrero Oscuro, has free kayaks, paddleboards, snorkel gear, and life jackets. We spent hours snorkeling around the rocky areas and saw some pretty unique fish and even an eel, sea stars, and a turtle. Ronnie spotted an octopus, which was a new one for us. There's also the newly reopened beach club called Casa de Playa. It's exactly what a beach club should be. There are tons of loungers and umbrellas, a small pool, a restaurant, and the staff even bring complimentary popsicles around while you're just hanging out. One thing that's unique about the beach club is that most guests get there by a free boat that picks up at the resort's main beach. We had one rough day there when the winds really picked up, like 30-mile-an-hour gusts. Sand was whipping into everyone's faces, and the entire beach club had to evacuate back to the main property by van. My one big regret is that we didn't go back to the beach club the next day. We missed a whale shark that spent 30 minutes in the bay right in front of the club. We've never seen one in the wild, so I'm still kicking myself for that one. The food at Andaz was mostly great. Our favorite restaurant was Chow Pascal, which serves Central and South American cuisine. The menu is literally a map of the region with dishes from each country labeled. My kids loved it so much that we went back there twice, and the food was simple enough that even though they didn't want to try everything, there was still plenty that they liked. As I mentioned before, breakfast at Rio Bongo was incredible. It was one of the best hotel breakfasts we've ever seen. There are hot options that are made to order, eggs, pancakes, fresh juices, tropical fruits, and a whole table full of different types of breads, including some gluten-free ones. There's even a separate kids buffet with things like a waffle bar and different types of cereal. If you're a fellow coffee lover, you'll be in heaven. They keep a carafe of cold brews sitting out every morning so that you can help yourself while you're waiting for a table. Plus, you can order any hot or cold drink you want with the buffet. In addition to the coffee I'd have during the meal, I'd order a frappuccino to go at the end and take it down to the pool with me to save money buying one later. By the way, be sure to watch your food while you're eating breakfast, because there are some mischievous little monkeys that like to swing into the restaurant since it's open air. Even if they can be a nuisance, it makes for some great pictures. We also tried ostra for Asian food one night, and honestly, it didn't quite hit the mark. The prices were really high, like $30 for a bowl of coconut laksa, and the quality just didn't match that. But overall, the dining was solid, especially for a resort. If we ever get back to the resort, I'll have the free van take us over to the Four Seasons Papagayo for their sunset happy hour. I've heard it's beautiful and that the food is next level. That's one of the few other dining options in the area that's easily accessible. Another thing that's great about the Andaz Papagayo is that it's really close to the airport in Liberia. The day we left, it only took 30 minutes to get there. We had our own car because we'd been driving around other parts of the country, but if you just wanted to pop over to the Andaz for a long weekend, you could totally get away with taking a shuttle, and it would be an incredible quick getaway. So let's zoom back out to our whole Costa Rica adventure and talk about what worked for our families and what we'd do differently next time. Let's start with the good. The progression from adventure to relaxation was perfect for us. Our son got his outdoor time, our daughter got the resort experience, and my husband and I got to try local food and spend time together as a family. And honestly, being forced to pivot our plans and check out the Central Valley turned out to be a highlight of the trip. We never would have gone there otherwise, and it was such a great introduction to Costa Rica without the crazy driving we would have done if we'd gone to Manuel Antonio like we'd originally planned. Costa Rica is also just really easy with kids. It's safe, the people are friendly, the food works for families even with dietary restrictions, and there's this great mixture of nature and comfort because the tourism infrastructure is really strong. Okay, so what didn't work? For one, the heat was tough. It was mid-90s in March, which is about 5 degrees warmer than usual, so it wasn't totally our fault for being caught off guard. We also should have booked dinner reservations at the Andaz before arriving. We didn't know that and scrambled a little bit because the popular restaurants were filling up, but you can always reserve those online in advance through OpenTable. I also wish we'd checked the hourly wind forecasts more carefully. It was something we just didn't know to look at, but it would have saved us from the beach evacuation. If we were doing it again, I would have loved to stay an extra night or 2 or 3 in La Fortuna to do even more of the cool activities. We'll have to go back another time to check out the hanging bridges and the nearby chocolate farm. and it definitely would have helped to give my kids a firm souvenir budget for the trip. We didn't do that, and there were some hard conversations when they saw the outrageous prices. Now, speaking of prices, let's talk money. This trip wasn't cheap, but we used points and miles to keep our out-of-pocket costs way down. For flights, we used our Southwest Companion Passes, which meant that each of us traveled for less than $100 round trip. That's a massive savings, especially for a family of 4. We booked the Andaz on World of Hyatt points. It was 29,000 points per night, which we earned through credit card sign-up bonuses with Chase, and I've linked our favorite Chase credit cards down in the show notes. That saved us over $5,000 on the room, though there's no way we would have spent that kind of cash out of pocket. Free breakfast as globalists saved us another $500 or so, and the free activities on site at the Andaz, like kayaks and paddle boards, probably saved another $200 to $300. If you don't have points or elite status, there's still other ways to save. You could get your beach time at a more affordable hotel or a vacation rental, or if you want to stick with the luxury resort experience, you can book through American Express Travel with a Platinum card or through Chase Travel with a Sapphire Reserve card to get free breakfast, resort credits, and potential upgrades. Plus, both of those credit cards give you a credit back for their luxury booking programs. Another option for the Andaz specifically is to find a friend who's a Hyatt globalist and ask them for a Guest of Honor award. It gives you all the elite benefits, free breakfast, waived resort fees, potential upgrades, and there's no cost to your friend. Plus, when you use it, you'll actually help them requalify for their status, so it's a win-win. For La Fortuna, our budget was in the middle of the pack for accommodations at around $1,000 for 3 nights with breakfast included. We could have saved a lot by staying at a vacation rental, but honestly, once I saw the lodge, I knew it would be a really special place to stay. I had originally booked Los Lagos for our accommodations, and that was about the same price. We definitely spent the most on our activities in La Fortuna, probably in the neighborhood of $300 per person total for ziplining, the wildlife tour, and the cooking class. And that travel insurance. It covered over $1,000 in costs from the flight diversion, the extra hotel night in Orlando, the missed Manuel Antonio reservation, meal expenses. Our annual policy more than paid for itself. All right, so would we go back to Costa Rica? Absolutely, but we'd probably structure our trip a little bit differently. Maybe spend more time in La Fortuna if we wanted to be in the north, and then head to the Monteverde Cloud Forest and finish off in a different beach area. Or what I'd really love to do next time is head down to the Osa Peninsula, which is supposed to have some of the best wildlife viewing in all of Costa Rica. Plus, it's got much thinner crowds than other parts of the country. There's a Hilton property down there that I've got my eye on, and I could book it through my Amex Platinum to save $300, plus that card gives me automatic gold status to cover breakfast and $50 every quarter that I can use at Hilton properties. The trick with Osa is that it's pretty far from the beaten path, so we'd have to either take a tiny plane or a long drive from San Jose to get there. The beauty of Costa Rica is that there are so many different ecosystems and experiences packed into one relatively small country. You can see cloud forests, rainforests, volcanoes, beaches, wildlife, all in one trip. Just remember, though, you can't do everything all at once. Pick your priorities, balance adventure with downtime, and leave room for some spontaneity. Also, please don't skip the travel insurance. Learn from our experience. You never know when your plane might turn around mid-flight. For families specifically, Costa Rica really is one of the easiest international destinations. It's a great place for families looking to dip their toes into Central and South America. Thanks so much for listening to Family Travel Unpacked. If you want even more details, specific hotel recommendations, tour links, booking strategies, and more, head over to thefamilyvoyage.com/Costa Rica, all one word, or look down in the show notes to check out our in-depth Costa Rica guides. Be sure to follow along and drop a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. That'll help other families find this podcast, which helps me keep on creating new episodes for you. Until next time, happy travels.